Every year something happens that I never thought of. It's too soon to feel happy, proud, sad, glad.
There's nothing more painful than a brother stabbing you in the back in the middle of the Bering Sea. Out there, 40-foot waves, freezing winds, and one wrong decision can cost lives. After more than 40 years at sea, Captain Sig Hansen has learned exactly who he can trust and who he can't. He has openly spoken about the captains and crew members who tested his patience, betrayed his trust, and made one of the world's most dangerous jobs even more dangerous. Who were they? And what really happened between them? Join us as we uncover what Sig Hansen revealed about the most difficult people he ever worked with. A legacy that creates expectation. In 2005 for king crab and 2006 for Apilio,
When you're at the dock and you're sitting around and you're not fishing, you're wasting time. You got a kind of a
the
shot.
Northwestern won the final Derby seasons, taking home titles for both the highest poundage caught and the highest dollars earned among all featured boats. Those were the last seasons before the quota system replaced the Derby format, meaning Northwestern's achievement in those final years stands as one of the definitive competitive marks in the modern history of the fishery. When Deadliest Catch arrived in 2005, it didn't create legends like Sig Hansen. It simply pointed a camera at men who had already been living there. Sig Hansen was doing exactly what he had been doing for a decade at that point, running the most productive crab boat on the Bering Sea. And in the process, they introduced Sig Hansen to 20 seasons of other captains, competing boats, shifting alliances, and moments of genuine conflict that he has never softened when he has talked about them. And of all the conflicts across 2 decades on the water, the ones that generated the most heat involved people Sig had once called friends. The Deadliest Catch cast is not a group of strangers thrown together for a competition show. These are real working fishermen who have been operating in the same waters, fishing the same stocks, competing for the same quotas, and sharing the same dangerous conditions for decades before any camera ever pointed at them. The alliances and rivalries on the show are built on real history, years of radio calls, shared intel, competitive maneuvering, and the trust that develops between people who rely on information from each other to find fish in an ocean that is very large and very unforgiving. Keith Colburn of the FV Wizard has been one of the consistent presences on Deadliest Catch since the show's early seasons. He is an aggressive, strategically sophisticated captain who has built a reputation for reading the water well and for being willing to use every legal competitive advantage available to him in the race for quota. His relationship with Sig Hansen has been one of the show's ongoing threads, competitive, mutual, sometimes warm, and at certain points genuinely hostile in ways that went beyond what the cameras were able to fully document. In Season 22, which premiered in May 2026, the dynamic between Keith and Sig crystallized around a single high-stakes decision that Sig made, and Colburn's response to it illustrated exactly the kind of competitor Colburn is, and why his relationship with Sig has always contained the specific tension it does. Sig had acquired access to an ROV, a remote-operated vehicle, the kind of underwater technology that allows a captain to actually see where the crab school is and track its movement with a precision that traditional surface-level reading of the water cannot match. The technology was expensive and unconventional for the Bering Sea fleet. Sig used it in partnership with Wild Bill Witrowski of the Summer Bay to track a crab school into the freezing northeast. The 2 boats worked the intelligence together while keeping it from the rest of the fleet. Keith, aboard the Wizard, spotted the partnership from his radar. He watched the Northwestern and the Summer Bay run parallel tracks half a mile apart, recognized immediately what it meant, and began working the information. He noted that Sig and Wild Bill were in cahoots, and that he could see exactly what they were doing from the wizard's navigation screen. What Keith did next revealed the quality of his competitive mind. He immediately began working to turn the situation to his advantage. He formed his own counter-alliance with Jonathan Hillstrand of the Time Bandit, who had his own grievance with Sig for being cut out of the intelligence, and the two began actively working to sabotage Sig's operation through direct interference. Deploying a literal wall of smoke to blind the Northwestern, tangling Sig's fishing lines to cause delays, physically attempting to disrupt a competing boat's operation in ways that went well past the normal give and take of competitive fishing. But Keith's sabotage in Season 22, while dramatic and verifiable on camera, was at least openly executed. The more personally damaging conflict in Sig Hansen's recent history involved someone he had thought of as a brother: the radio that went silent. Of all the relationships Sig Hansen has built across 20-plus years of Deadliest Catch, his friendship with Jonathan Hillstrand of the Time Bandit was the one that most consistently suggested that the competitive world of Bering Sea crab fishing was capable of producing genuine, lasting human connection. The two captains had a specific warmth in their interactions across seasons, the kind of easiness that develops between people who have genuinely been through difficult things together and who have come to trust each other's judgment in conditions where trust is the most valuable currency available. Jonathan put it in plain language when the friendship came apart. "That was my buddy a year ago." He said they had been best friends, and now he was getting radio silence, getting ghosted because of a competition. Sig had made a strategic decision. The ROV technology and the partnership with Wild Bill required tight information security to be effective. Sharing the intel with anyone, even Jonathan, who he had run alongside for years, would have diluted the competitive advantage. He kept the radio quiet. He made the call that winning required the intelligence to stay between two boats, not three. Jonathan experienced that silence as abandonment by one's closest friend. He experienced it through the lens of a friendship he believed was solid, and the hurt of someone who discovers that what they thought was a relationship with no ceiling on loyalty had a ceiling all along, and that the ceiling turned out to be the amount of money at stake on a single fishing season. The immediate response, aligning with Keith to counterattack, deploying the smokescreen, tangling the lines, was Jonathan's version of saying out loud what he would not say on the radio. If Sig was going to treat him like a stranger, he was going to compete like one and sabotage his progress in the process. The Season 22 episode resolved, ultimately, with a rare moment of genuine reconciliation. The crab school turned out to be too large for two boats to fish efficiently, and Sig made the call to invite Jonathan and Colburn back in to help pinpoint the edge of the school. Jonathan, at that moment, apologized for the smokescreen. The competitive pressure had eased enough for the human relationship to reassert itself. But something had been said in the process, or rather, not said, and it's the fact that the apology could acknowledge, but not entirely erase. The radio silence was real, and Sig's assessment of what the silence had cost, and whether the friendship that predated it could survive it intact, is something he has addressed with bluntness. The Colburn-Hillstrand counter-alliance in Season 22 was the most visible recent conflict. But the full history of Sig Hansen's assessments of the people around him goes considerably deeper and considerably darker than a single season's drama. Ego, greed, and the reckless decisions. In August 2025, Sig Hansen sat down with Fox News Digital and said something that the version of himself from 20 years earlier would probably not have said publicly, because the version of himself from 20 years earlier was still operating at the pace of someone who did not yet fully understand what the costs of certain decisions actually were. He told the outlet, that ego and greed had been responsible for some of the most reckless decisions he had made at sea. He described harrowing stories from decades on the Bering Sea, crew injuries, fires aboard the boat with family members present, the specific moments where the combination of competitive ambition and the emotional state of wanting to win had pushed him toward choices that endangered the people he was responsible for. That is a significant admission. The most celebrated and most successful captain in Deadliest Catches history. The man whose safety record stands as one of the defining achievements of his career, sitting down and saying that his own ego and greed had driven dangerous decisions. Not the ego and greed of other captains, his own. Sig Hansen is not simply the man who has dealt with difficult people around him. He is also a man who has spent 20 years genuinely reckoning with the specific ways that his own character, the drive to win, the competitive intensity that has also made him one of the best in the history of the fishery, has at times been its own kind of danger. The most difficult person he has ever worked alongside has, on his own account, sometimes been himself. The same relentless competitive drive that made the Northwestern the top producer in the final Derby seasons is the same quality that, pointed in the wrong direction or applied without adequate restraint, has produced decisions that endangered his crew. And understanding that Sig Hansen's assessments of other people's difficult or dangerous behavior come from a man who has done the work of honestly assessing his own, is what gives those assessments their credibility. He is not simply pointing at the captains who sabotaged him or the people who crossed him. He is someone who has done the honest accounting of the ways his own character has been a danger, and who speaks about the behavior of others from that place. That perspective wasn't built in a single fishing season, or even across 20 seasons of Deadliest Catch. It was decades in the making, beginning with a childhood where the Bering Sea wasn't a destination, it was simply home. The man who was already captain before most people learned to drive. Sig Hansen is the eldest of 3 sons in a Norwegian-American fishing family whose relationship with the Bering Sea went back generations before Sig was old enough to understand what a family legacy meant. His father, Sverre Hansen, and his grandfather before him had been instrumental in pioneering opilio crab fishing in Alaskan water, specifically developing the practice that gave crab boats a way to generate income year-round rather than being limited to short-term seasonal windows. This was not simply a family business. This was a family contribution to an entire industry that employed thousands of people and shaped the commercial fishing economy of the Pacific Northwest. He started fishing at 14, and it was not as a summer job to build character, but as a working deckhand on his father's boat, doing the same work the grown men around him were doing, in the same conditions, for the same stakes. By 22, he was a relief skipper, filling in for other captains on the Northwestern and doing short stints on other boats in the fleet. By 24, he was running Northwestern full-time. The Northwestern has never lost a single crew member at sea in the nearly 30 years that Sig has been at its helm. In the Bering Sea, that is not luck. The Northwestern's serious injury rate runs significantly below the fleet average. In an industry where the most dangerous job in America, consistently ranked as the occupation with the highest fatality rate, is the only occupation, safety record is the ultimate measure of a captain's judgment. And Sig Hansen's safety record is one of the best in the history of the fishery. When he says something about another person's character or another captain's behavior, that assessment is coming from a man who has been doing this longer than most people alive, and who has staked his crew's lives on his ability to read situations and people accurately. He does not exaggerate for drama. He is blunt because the profession he built his life around has no use for anything other than bluntness. So when he started talking about the people who made his life hardest on the water, what he said carried the weight of someone who had genuinely lived through everything he was describing. But Sig's opinions weren't formed in interviews or television confessionals. They were forged by a place that has no patience for ego, excuses, or second chances. The Bering Sea has a way of exposing people for who they really are. The Bering Sea as a character test. Here is the thing about Deadliest Catch that the casual viewer sometimes misses. The show is not really about crab. The crab is the mechanism, the reason these people are out there, the financial engine that keeps the boats running and the crew employed and the whole enterprise viable. But what the show has actually documented across 20-plus seasons is a sustained, brutal, unrelenting character test administered by the most honest testing environment on Earth. The Bering Sea does not care about your reputation. It does not care about your television contract, or your Q score, or the deal you made with the captain of another boat last week. It cares about whether your decisions are sound, your equipment is maintained, your crew is competent, and your judgment holds up when the pressure is at its absolute maximum. Every other variable gets stripped away eventually. What remains is character. Sig Hansen has been in the water 20-plus seasons. He has seen what the sea reveals about people, including things they could successfully hide in warmer, safer, less demanding environments. The captains who presented as steady and reliable until the moment they were under genuine pressure and then made decisions that endangered everyone around them. The people who operated honestly when there was no competitive advantage to be gained from dishonesty, and differently when there was. What he has described across the Fox News interview and the 20 seasons of the show and the various statements he has made about captains and specific conflicts is a coherent picture of what the Bering Sea has taught him about human nature. Trust has to be earned in conditions where the cost of misplaced trust is paid in people's lives. Competition is real and legitimate, and there is an enormous difference between competing hard and competing dirty. And ego, the dangerous variety that causes a person to prioritize their own need to win over the safety of the people they are responsible for, is the most reliable predictor of catastrophic decisions that the fishing world has. Season 20, whose finale aired in October 2024, showed Sig dealing with a power failure on the northwestern 130 miles from port, in complete darkness, forced to use manual steering while his crew waited for daylight with no GPS and none of the modern navigation systems that have become standard assumptions of the work. At that moment, in the dark, on manual, with no electronic assistance and no way to know exactly where they were, the 40 years of experience were the only backup system available. He managed it because the quality that 20 seasons of the hardest fishing in the world produces, in a person who genuinely has it, is the ability to stay functional when everything that normally provides structure and certainty is gone. Not calm, necessarily. Functional, making the next right decision with whatever information is actually available, rather than the information you wish you had. Yet the captains who challenged Sig weren't the only people who left lasting scars. Some of the hardest lessons came from betrayals that had nothing to do with competition. What he actually said about the worst people he has encountered. The most dangerous people he has worked alongside, by his account and the documented record, share specific qualities. They are people who prioritize their own competitive position so completely that the safety of others becomes secondary to winning. They are people who will use information asymmetry as a weapon rather than simply as a competitive advantage. And they are people whose ego prevents them from making the adjustments that the sea demands when reality does not match the plan. The ego and greed he identified as his own worst qualities are the same qualities he has watched, in their most extreme expressions, produce the most genuinely dangerous behavior in the people around him. The difference between a captain whose ego drives him to push too hard in difficult conditions and a captain who endangers his crew by refusing to acknowledge that the conditions have won, that difference is the difference between someone whose failings are recoverable and someone who represents a genuine threat to everyone around him. Sig has survived every version of that threat, on himself and in the people around him. Because 40 years of making decisions in conditions that don't allow for comfortable self-deception have built in him the kind of honesty about what he is looking at that most people never develop. He knows what danger looks like because he has seen it from the outside and has felt it from the inside. That combination of experience is what makes his assessments of other people so reliable. What do you think is the most dangerous thing someone can bring onto a boat in the Bering Sea? Another captain's ambition or your own? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.